I was very aware as a young child that there was a need to tell this story to the world. Palestine. It was the food that satiated my hunger. It was the culture that made me feel home.
Throughout history, boycotts have played a decisive role in the struggle against state oppression. And that's exactly why the Palestinian boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement has been gaining traction worldwide. Why is the Israeli government trying so hard to discredit and stop BDS? Here in Chelsea, and I've been lucky enough to be invited to one of Palestinian chef Judy Kella's infamous suppers.
I'm sick of people telling me to take a break from documenting the genocide.
A university, like countless others in the United States, that is supporting genocide and that is not protecting students who speak out.
I'm Ahmed Shahab الدين. I'm a journalist, a producer, an actor, and someone who believes in human rights and dignity and justice for all human beings. Palestine means a lot of things to me. The path towards authenticity and also belonging, despite having never grown up there. I think all human beings are searching for a sense of belonging. And I've been privileged and fortunate enough to live in a lot of different countries and familiarize myself with a lot of different cultures. But throughout that entire journey of life, Palestine given me a sense of purpose and belonging and homes. When I was younger, I used to always introduce myself as Palestinian by blood and then American by birth. My mother was born in Akka and my father was born in Jaffa, so 1948 Palestine, and they each left respectively in 1948 and 1967. Their journeys, like so many journeys of Palestinians, have been very tumultuous. My mom was born in Akka, but then she spent most of her childhood in Haifa, so near Haifa, and then she ended up in Nablus, and then Lebanon, and then eventually in Kuwait. And my father's journey in 1948 with his family, he was very young when they were forced to flee their homes in Jaffa, and they went to the border with Egypt, and then eventually Iraq and Syria, and it was a whole kind of long journey, traveling from one country to another, trying to find a home, trying to settle. In my mind and in my heart, that makes me as Palestinian as anybody else. It was always me who was asking the questions, and other family members were more forthright. But I think, we all process trauma in very different ways. And, the way this trauma manifests, I've seen and I've learned throughout my career, not just through my parents and my grandparents. Whenever I would talk to my grandparents before they passed away in Kuwait about, their journey out of Palestine and what life was like before, I think a lot of that as a child, that experience, invariably influenced, again, the fact that I chose to go into journalism. I spent about 15 years telling stories like the Palestinian stories about social justice, dignity, freedom, and the struggle for all that. News is sort of a rigid, especially TV news, tends to be a very blunt instrument, and in a sense is quite limited in terms of getting people to empathize. Whereas music, for example, or film and those kinds of stories can be so much more impactful than I think many of us realize. I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, when a young rapper from Palestine, or when a black rapper from Atlanta, or a singer from Palestine in 1948 Palestine, whatever it might be, When I watch dancers dance in a dance inspired by, an experience they had when they were visiting Al-Khalil, Hebron, or Jerusalem. When I see black poets like Aja Monet comes to mind, go to Palestine and see and witness the occupation and then come back and incorporate that into their poetry. This kind of collective form of storytelling, I think, really highlights the real power of storytelling in impacting people and how that can make someone feel something they otherwise wouldn't have been able to feel, and those feelings can be a conduit to understanding in a way that sometimes, traditional news and journalism doesn't.
The journalist who's worked for over 15 years for many mainstream news organizations and now works independently, I know the disillusionment can be very, very, very powerful. But I hope that our presence here today is a reminder of the brave and courageous people across all disciplines and all fields who do believe still in justice, who do believe...
There's a clear collusion between politics, corporations, so the economy, and the media. And that collusion happens with, this revolving door of power and influence. When Palestinians or people who are sharing the Palestinian experience report truths, we are penalized. And that omission, whether in a headline or in a news report from the mainstream media, that dehumanization of Palestinians, the erasure of the Palestinian experience, even in a genocide.
What is wrong with this headline is very simple. It is not the war that turned Gaza into a graveyard for children. It is Israel that turned Gaza into a graveyard for children.
I use social media guided by transparency and accountability to share information that I know is missing from the mainstream media.
Biden gives Israel 45 days to submit report on international law violations or lose military aid. This would make you think that they actually are trying to issue some sort of new directive or new condition. For decades, Israel has received billions from the US under Biden's presidency, Obama's presidency when Biden was vice president, so on and so forth. And there have been, widespread documentation of their violations of international law, and yet no action.
It's encouraging to see individuals and these startups and these news channels sort of punching upwards and forcing the mainstream media to pay attention to what they should be doing, which is reporting the reality on the ground, rather than, as we've seen with the others, where they admitted that they cannot really publish anything without getting it approved by the occupiers. If someone were to ask me why is it important to speak about Palestine, when we don't protect the Palestinian people, when we don't try to employ the mechanisms that are in place to do that, it makes us all less safe. I do think that we're coming to a point, that said, where Palestinians and the Palestinian cause is becoming undeniable. It's a measure of sort of moral courage for anybody who's trying to, struggle or fight for dignity and freedom anywhere.